All right, well, good afternoon, committee. We officially have the band back together, except Representative Ruiz may be a little bit late or attending another meeting. So without further ado, this is the first social services budget, that's actually the third social services budget committee meeting of this session. We had two last week. Oh, there she is. Come on in. Okay, so I'm hopeful that we're not going to take the entire time today. We've got a pretty abbreviated schedule. Just kind of want to set up and tee the committee up for what we've got going. Really, like last year, the first 5 to 6 weeks, I'm asking for your patience and grace to get through the next 5 to 6 weeks. And a little bit of good news to start. We're going to move the Friday meeting to 1:30, same time or same location in this room. So we're not going to meet at 3:30 Friday. We'll be in here at the earlier session, but we are going to meet. Representative Wolcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's just the one time for this coming Friday, correct?
Yeah, and we'll look at it for subsequent Fridays. I know of a conference room that we can move to that isn't here. I forget who has this room at 1:30. But we've got other places we can go. So we'll try to do that to be respectful of your time on Fridays going forward. Representative Reese.
When the speaker said we weren't going to be here on Fridays, I scheduled myself to work on Fridays. So the sooner I know whether we have to be here on a Friday, the better, because I can reschedule or something.
So okay, will you make it this Friday or do we need to get her?
I'll be here.
Okay. And then it's a weekly thing, so, okay, all right. I will do everything that I can. I'll do everything, and we'll try to be judicious about that. Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Representative Reese. I am too also seeing patients on Friday, but my telehealth is in the morning, so I think I'll make it work. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And again, it's really, if you remember last year, what we're driving to is somewhere between the 16th and the 20th, getting the budget kicked out and over so we can begin meaningful work. The difference is, again, this year, the Senate is going to begin work on the budget this week as well. They're not going to wait until we kick them something over. So that's the big difference. Okay, so we do have an agenda today. I'm going to start with an overview of the interim committee reports, a little bit of a coma briefing from Amanda, and an overview of the budget process. Some of this you will have seen last Thursday and Friday during our earlier two meetings, but then we'll kind of go from there. And then I want to direct your attention. I've got other things I want to add to it when we close. A little bit about what's going to happen on Thursday the 15th, and then a topic that I think you might be interested in on January 29th. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amanda.
All right, hello committee. Amanda, Legislative Research. I think the first item on the agenda is kind of touching on some of the interim committee reports. So we're only selecting a few that are relevant to this committee. Several of them are also still in editing, and so they have not been approved by the committees yet. So we're only going to go over a couple. The first one is going to be the report on the Special Committee on Health and Social Services. This included 6 days. It included several of you on this. And the committee was directed to look at the IDD wait lists and IDD workforce issues. The committee was asked to consider the usage of contract staff at state hospitals, and then also study the process of credentialing and surveying nursing facilities. Flipping the page, you're going to see that each of these reports includes pages with gray boxes, and those gray boxes are some of the important stuff. That details the committee's conclusions and recommendations, and so I'm just going to highlight a few in this particular report. So regarding state hospitals and contract nursing, the committee requested KDADS study and develop cost-effective alternatives to staff the Kansas State hospitals while minimizing contract nursing costs. The committee requested that KDADS provide a comprehensive list of all publicly funded behavioral health service providers. The committee wanted the legislature to study ways to incentivize and attract additional nursing faculty to the state. The committee directed KDADS to work with D of A to determine how to allow state hospitals to create internal PRN nursing positions. The committee wanted to increase the transfer of funds from lottery vending machine sales that support the Community Crisis Stabilization Center Fund and the Clubhouse Model Program Fund within KDADS. The committee asked that the legislature consider ways to promote or incentivize other hospitals to become state institutional alternative facilities for inpatient psychiatric treatment. Regarding state hospitals and contract nursing, the last bullet there, the committee asked that the legislature study sentencing guidelines for sexually violent crimes and consider increasing the penalty level for those crimes. Regarding IDD and targeted case management, that's kind of the next section. The committee made 2 requests of KDADS. They asked that KDADS give a timeline for the community support waiver as they submit and seek approval from CMS. They also asked KDAD to request a fiscal note from them, increasing day services from 25 to 40 hours a week for the IDD and community-based service waiver. And then there was 3 directions there. Direct KDADS to take a cautious approach with unbundling day services. Directed KDADS to develop a plan for a public-facing waitlist status portal. And then also directed KDADS to develop an only willing and qualified provider waiver policy to address rural and frontier concerns about conflict-free targeted case management. And then lastly, regarding nursing facilities, this committee made several recommendations. The 3rd bullet point there, they requested that KDADS present testimony this session to the appropriate committees regarding the status of hiring new surveyors. And then the 6th bullet on there, they want the legislature to determine the parameters and better understand the Civil Monetary Penalty Reinvestment Fund. And to use a portion of those funds for training and other strategic means of improving the surveying and credentialing program. So traditionally, CMS finds long-term care facilities, and a portion of that goes into this fund, comes back to the state and goes into that fund for KDADS to use on projects to benefit nursing home residents. And so the question is, can this be used for surveying and credentialing? And last, on the flip side of that page, that last one at the very top, this committee wanted the legislature to determine the fiscal impact of raising the personal needs allowance and consider increasing that amount and providing an annual cost of living adjustment. So that covers the recommendations for Special Committee on Health and Social Services. If there are any questions, Chair?
I'm going to be mindful of time here, but are there any questions you might have? We could go down the rabbit hole on these long and deep today, but what I would, if you have questions, maybe keep them to status or process or what's next, if that's helpful. Again, I'm just trying to be mindful of our time today because these are multi-day sessions over multiple months. Some of the members of this committee actually went through this stuff. But I'll try to tee it up at that. Are there any process or what's next questions for these? Okay, and I may, okay, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to, bullet number 3 on the surveying, the nursing facility surveying, certification and credentialing. Does that kind of all encompass the fact that we were looking at hiring dietitians and not just nurses on that? Is that detailed enough of a, or is there another bullet that, I think that if some of the committee members that were on that committee, we talked about, you know, right now we have all RNs on that, and we talked about, you know, doing dietitians or, and the qualifications for that. Does that encompass that enough? Is that detailed enough, or is that the bullet point that I'm looking at, or did I miss one?
Chair and Representative, I couldn't answer that question. I don't know if someone else on the committee happens to remember. All I can tell you is that this report was accepted by the committee. I could do some more digging to see if that particular item is referencing what you're talking about with the additional expanding the staff. I'm not sure though.
And I might suggest it may be the combination of that one and the next one where it says, consider creating multidisciplinary survey teams to ease the hiring. I think that's
There it is.
the ones.
Yeah, for us lay people, that probably doesn't quite get there, but.
Representative Reese?
Yes, that did encompass that multidisciplinary survey team, but it was also, I think because we heard from some of the nursing homes that they weren't talking about bias so much, but they just thought about maybe a multidisciplinary team might come up with better recommendations. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. That's the Bethel one. Of course, Bethel is directed by statute to oversee long-term care services, savings related to the waiver programs, and then to oversee CHIP, PACE, and the state's Medicaid program. Again, looking at those gray boxes, related to budget, the second bullet there, the committee did recommend that there would be an analysis of the preventative maintenance and/or safety check processes and an analysis of the billing processes related to DME and complex wheelchairs. The last bullet on that page, they recommended that the 26th legislature thoroughly review House Bill 2386 from last session. That bill didn't pass. That bill is trying to remove the specific year for the federal poverty level for eligibility for the CHIP program, and instead just make eligibility based on 250% of the federal poverty level as published that year by the feds, rather than always reverting back to, I think it's 2008. And then flipping to the second page, next page, that gray box at the top there, Bethel also recommended that several of the agencies request a billing code from CMS for sedation dentistry mobile providers. They also recommended an additional 500 slots for the IDD waiver, which, Sharday, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that is included in the KDAD's budget request. And then they also had some proposed legislation that they were requesting, and that would be that a bill would be introduced in the Senate to remove the requirement for the April committee meeting to be held during regular legislative session. And so that covers the recommendations from Bethel, if there aren't any questions.
Again, kind of same guy, Representative Steens?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I just had a quick question on that second bullet point that you were talking about with the complex wheelchair and durable medical equipment. Because that's something that I believe CMS used to pay for, right? Is this related to like MCOs and just KenCare? Is that something that they used to pay for and now they're thinking about paying for again, this preventative and maintenance services? Because I was under the impression they used to, and then they kind of went away for a while.
That is a very detailed question, Chair and Representative. There's a person behind me that I know remembers the answer to that question, but I wouldn't know off the tip of my head, but I can certainly get back to you on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, other questions? I might just make a comment on some of these things. I'm going to make this encouragement to, when you get away from committee and you have more time to go back and read these conclusions and recommendations in depth. Some of these, like I believe the complex wheelchair one and durable medical equipment, is kind of a continuation of a proviso that we did in this committee this past session. That's why it came up. And there's a few other ones. So as you read through these, if you see, and once we see the budget, because Amanda made a good point, we haven't seen the big three budgets yet to see what's included and what's not. We need to kind of do a check against these recommendations and their respective status. On top of that, I will try to do an independent status check with the appropriate agency person. But if there's action that we can take or we need to take from a committee standpoint, either in the form of a recommendation or a proviso, I would ask for all of your support looking through these, because the last thing for me, we spent a good amount of time once we gavelled out of here last summer or last spring, over the summer, working on this stuff. And so these, I want to make sure that we don't lose, or these recommendations don't fall through the cracks, so to speak. So again, if you would, take these back, highlight them, just go through your own recollection and say, okay, what bias for action do we need to take, if any, on some of these? Some of them are works in process or progress, but I would ask I would ask for the committee's collective help to do that. So, any other questions on this one? Okay, so I am going to stop right. Yeah, no, I won't break my own rule. I'm tempted, but I'm not. Okay, Amanda.
Sure, Chair, thank you. And there's actually not much else to cover. There are 2 other interim committee reports in your packet, one related to the pharmaceutical studies, and then one joint committee on child welfare system oversight, because you will hear DCF's budget in this committee, but neither of those had recommendations significant to the budget, so I wasn't going to go over those.
Perfect. Okay, did you want to do the overview of the budget process while you're there?
Sure. So Chair and Committee, I don't have a lot to add on this. I feel like I've been a broken record talking a lot about it. But we do always want to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same speed for where we're at. So remember, historically, agencies would make the budget request. The governor would make recommendations on that budget request based on his or her priorities. And then the legislature would appropriate funding. So basically giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down to pieces within the governor's budget bill. So last year, legislature elected to do things a little bit differently. Now the agency still submits a budget request and the governor still makes recommendations on that request. That's what's going to come out tomorrow. But instead of the legislature responding to the governor's recommendation, the special committee on state budget was formed. So this committee heard those agency requests in November, December, and then came forth and introduced their own bill to the legislature, their own appropriations bill. That, of course, came out today. One of them I have up here is I have the House version, 2434, so you should have that in your packet on your desk. And then also on the Senate side, there's Senate Bill 315. And so these, of course, are mirror bills. The plan is to run them through the budget process at the same time, similar to how it's been done historically, and then, of course, conference at the end to reconcile any differences. Last week, the committee received 2 documents from me, I hope you remember. One was the gray sheet that had all those global motions, but that was made by that special committee on state budget. Those of you that were absent last week that I may have handed it to just now, it's on a white sheet. You didn't get yours on a gray. Sorry. And then another one was the multicolored document. That one you might want to make sure you have in front of you if you were absent last week. That's going to be what our office calls a shorthand, and it always shows the differences. In this case, the one you have in front of you would have been the one that shows differences between how the agency submitted their budget and then how SBC responded. If you happen to be looking at it, I think the phrase is action reversed. Will be down that middle column, and that is all tied, most of those are tied to the SBC global motion to not approve enhancements and supplementals. And so that's why you're seeing that action reversed there. I would presume at the end of this week, prior to some of the recommendations we're considering doing at the end of this week that you are all considering doing this week, you'll receive another shorthand document from me. That one is going to look very similar, but you need to make sure you're looking at the top header part, because in that case, that shorthand document is going to show you the agency on the left and then what the governor recommended. So you're able to see what her bill includes compared to where we're at with the SBC bills. So that's all I have. Are there any other questions, Chair?
I don't think there wouldn't be anything to add as far as the budget recommendation process that we're going to go through Friday. We'll stumble through that together gracefully. Okay, perfect. Okay, any other questions for Amanda on the process or where we are? Okay. Okay, so I want to find my notes here. Give me 1 second. We can open this up for dialogue, but again, in the interest of time and the governor's State of the State address. Okay, so I think everybody knows that, and we will hear the governor's budget guidance tonight. I know that the guidance I have received is collectively the legislature is looking for somewhere around a $200 million spend reduction. That's just kind of a starting point. I'm not going to dwell on that. What I would ask us to focus in, let's focus when we get them, the agency budgets, and then additional requests that may be coming in, but that's kind of the starting point. One thing that is different, and I think Francie's already done this. Have you, I digress, have you emailed out the bluff statement thing yet? Or you just have it? Okay. Pardon the sidebar. One of the things that I will be, what Francie will be putting in a packet or in when we get materials or testimonials submitted to us, if there's a request for funding, one of the tools that I've asked for is at the very front of those requests is the bluff message. Stands for bottom line up front. And if you've been around the military, if you Google it, you can find out what bluff means. But it's a 2-paragraph, essentially, no more than 2 paragraphs. This is what the request is, this is what it will do, and this is the cost savings to the state or something like that. It's essentially a business case. You make it as concise as possible. The agencies are free to submit everything else under, but the message doesn't get lost in the front. Selfishly, what it will help me do and help us do as a committee is when we are considering budget recommendations or potentially provisos, it's a concise, consistent way for us to characterize those requests. So I've drafted up something very rudimentary, given it to Francie, and she'll make her magic happen. So that's the first thing on the bluff statement. Yeah. I mean, bottom line up front. Committee schedule. I talked about this a little bit already, and before I forget, we were going to go over COMA also, right? You want to? Okay. At some point, I would like just a primer on COMA Core before we leave today. Is that okay? Well, we can do it another day. Jill, please. We're all friends here.
Pardon me, sir. So the revisor's office has a memo that we generally hand out with it, but if you would like me to go over it today, I can, and then hand out the memo later. It's just whatever you prefer.
Well, in the absence of time and schedule, let's see where we finish, and if you're comfortable doing it, we may do that. Okay. Okay, I talked about the committee schedule a little bit, and Amanda has done a great deal of work getting us through January. Francie has picked it up, so we are plowing through that, January, February schedule looks like this. Everything's plugged in. This is kind of what's driving us, and where we can, especially on the Fridays and up to that one point, we'll be as judicious as we can to make schedule changes that'll work. I had a note here to talk about provisos and recs. I'm going to skip that for now. Informational topics. So if you look at the schedule for this week, you'll notice that on January the 15th, we're going to have an informational hearing on the sexual predator treatment program. That is something that generated, and I see Amy sitting in this room somewhere, I think, or she did. We'll be seeing Amy on Thursday. Some of this bubbles up out of the interim committees, but it also comes about, we had a Zoom call with a handful of folks back last year. It's really, we have, I forget how many, roughly 300 people in the sexual predator treatment program at a pretty sizable cost to the state, and they're just kind of stuck there. So what we're going to do, and you can look at the agenda to see what the statutory requirements are. I don't know that there is, based on the Thursday meeting, we know this, we can do this. But this is the starting point. This is one of those cans that's been kicked down the road, and this is in our purview. So we're going to take that first look at it this Thursday, the 15th. A related topic is, and I would ask committee members, you can take a note on this, on the 29th of January in the Health and Human Services Committee, there's going to be a presentation on the Alzheimer's from Kansas University on their Alzheimer's Disease Research Center and a treatment model that they're going to present. My vice and then the chair of HHS, we tried to find a place and time where Dr. Jeffrey Burns from KU is going to come in and present to the House and the Senate. I selfishly wanted to do it in this committee, but there is no time on this calendar to do it. So if you can be available on that day and you're interested in that topic, I can tell you it's fascinating in terms of Alzheimer's disease research and diagnosis and treatment. Chair Carpenter in Health is going to have that on the 29th. So just make a mental note, 1:30? And that is in 112 North. So, yeah, okay. And so then what I would say is, just take a quick pause. And again, going back to the recommendations that are contained in the interim committees. So if you look at that time frame from the 12th or 15th of February and you kind of project it out till we adjourn, and I know things get crazy, but what I would invite you to do is take a look at the time available that we have in that schedule to maybe get either informational hearings or briefings on other topics that are contained in here. So I am one looking at a potential hearing on our state hospitals and what some of the next steps are relative to the recommendations in the Bethel Committee. And I want to get that in front of this committee to continue that dialogue, because it will continue with, that subject will continue to be a part of the Bethel Committee. I'm going to look to my two cohorts to my left. The Bethel Committee meets again on the 23rd, is that correct? Okay, I think it is. So Bethel Committee meets throughout the year and in the summer. The next one is scheduled for the 23rd. So I make that offer if you know of topics that are relative to this committee, that can, especially those that are related to recommendations in the interim committees, and we can get it planned and executed in the agenda, I'm all for that. If I felt like last year, the one opportunity we did that as a committee was the 988 call center, and that was kind of a field trip. But again, I'm requesting your engagement in the process to see what we can do and do better. Pardon? If you have it, I'll take the suggestion now, but then we can kind of work the date if you can know a date offline. So, Representative Orpeza, you seem to have a topic.
So, thank you, Chair. I did have an idea as you were speaking. I don't know if this is normal or not, but hearing from those one-time expenditures that we've done out of this budget to see kind of where that's helped the state of Kansas and really seeing the fruits and benefits from those one-time expenditures.
If we can make that happen, that would be great. If you're referring to the nursing homes without walls as an example.
Yes, as an example, there was the stepping stone people who had the kitchen, those types of things.
Okay. Okay, so I would say if you can go back and maybe kind of create a short list of that, and we can see if we can't work out a year later or something like that. Okay, great suggestion. Any others? Okay, I think that is, other than the update on coma from Jill, I think that's all I have right now. So committee, I'm going to look around the room. Any other topics for today? Okay, so shameless plug from the Vice.
I had it on and turned it off. Okay, and so many of you have heard about the Southeast Kansas, the high salaries and all that kind of stuff. We will have them before the Health and Human Services Committee next Tuesday, and you're all welcome to come in and get some answers.
Perfect, thank you, thank you. Okay, any others? Jill? Coma and Cora?
So sometimes during, my name's Jill Walters, Reviser of Statutes. Sometimes during the session, the Revisor's Office is asked to briefly talk about the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act, commonly known as COMA and CORA. And so legislative and administrative bodies of the state are required to follow CORA and COMA. So this committee would be subject, the Social Services Budget Committee would be subject to COMA. Now, we might recall that House rules can make some changes on that, but generally it follows that the meetings are open to the public. The public access to the meeting must be available. Notice of the meeting must be provided on request. And then the chair usually delegates that request to the committee's assistant. And so in this case, Francie, if somebody wants copy of the agenda or notice about it, those people would notify Francie, and then it would be sent out. We always try to remember that COMA is usually interpreted broadly to achieve the purpose of facilitating an informed electorate. And because this is a key principle of our democracy to have open government, it's sometimes a sensitive area for the public, so we just always like to remind people to always be considerate of that. If a question arises, the Attorney General or the District Attorney can investigate this, and then sometimes a fine can be involved, training can be involved. The Attorney General or the DA might think the training would be helpful to a group, a public group, and so that happens. So a meeting is any gathering via any method of two-way communication that occurs at any location and involves a majority of the voting members of the body. And it is when they're doing business of the body. And so we want to remind people that social events or traveling are not meetings if business is not discussed by a majority of members of the body. And then attending an educational meeting, an educational convention, or a listening meeting is not generally considered a meeting because you're not discussing what you are going to do or how you're going to vote. So those are available. So I just wanted to remind you there were two changes, or a couple of changes to open meetings last year in a bill that we added, or excuse me, the legislature added a provision that the use of cameras, photography, lights, and recording devices are allowed subject to the reasonable rules of the body to ensure that orderly conduct of the proceedings is conducted at a meeting. So, I mean, I always like to use the example, if somebody wanted to put a camera right behind Representative Ballard, that might disrupt the committee. And so the chairman might say, well, would you please move your camera there, or would you move it maybe way in the back corner, just so you're not disrupting the proceedings of the meeting. And then if a public body voluntarily elects to live stream their meeting on TV, the internet, or any other form of medium, they should ensure that all aspects of the open meeting are available through that. And then the law actually says an unintentional technical failure or action taken by the provider that actually disrupts or prevents the live stream, that doesn't constitute a violation, because you all are in a place meeting, the public is allowed to be here. We are trying to be more open and transparent and letting other folks, but if for some reason there's a glitch, that doesn't, an information technology glitch, that doesn't mean it's a violation of an open meeting. Things can continue to go on like they can, and that doesn't matter. The second requirement of COMA, besides is it a meeting, and then you have to provide proper notice. So, and that again would go through Francie on that. So is there any questions on open meetings before I move on to open records?
Representative Reese.
Thank you for the overview. Does this cover agenda meetings, like when agenda meetings are scheduled and the content of the agenda, and giving the public a certain amount of notice?
So may I ask, by agenda meeting, do you mean a planning meeting?
Like a committee, having an agenda, for instance, if this committee has meetings already scheduled for next week, and the agenda, the items that are being covered in that agenda is already published, is there a certain amount of time that, like, do you have to have 24-hour notice? And how much notice does is the public supposed to have in order for them to provide maybe opponent or proponent testimony?
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing specific in the statute. And we think about how things are so fluid and changing in our environment. And so if, I think, for example, like if it had been practiced for several years before that you give 24-hour notice, maybe that would be flagged as something different if it wasn't. But in this environment, and I think of conference committees, you know, we might go to conference, somebody will make an offer, and then we say, we're meeting, you know, we're adjourning for 15 minutes, and then we're coming back. And so those things are announced at an open mic. That's the typical practice of the legislative process. That's how fluid it is. And so I think generally how it would be looked at is it'd be a case-by-case review. And if you were doing something so out of the ordinary that it would seem to circumvent the notice to folks, then I think the Attorney General would get involved to investigate that. But I think when there are procedures that we have set in place, you know, like, I don't know if you notice, people can, or if you're signed up for, but people can sign up for notices of conferences. And so like as soon as the, you know, chairman gets off the mic with the offer, we're on putting it on the internet and pushing out those notices that it'll meet at 4:30. And then the next one's, you know, 4:45 and 5. So we are as soon as possible getting those out, and that's just normal practice.
Any other questions? You want to roll on?
Yeah, very good. So when we talk about open records, of course, basically the same thing. It requires public records of a public agency to be open for inspection. So the state, a public agency is defined as basically any state or political or taxing subdivision of the state, office, or agency that is supported in whole or part by public funds appropriated by the state. And then so the committee and any subcommittees of this committee would fall under the definition of a public agency because we are all supported by public funds. There's procedures, like if you would get an open records request for documents you have, then there's a procedure that you have 3 days to respond that you received the request. You don't have to send the documents in 3 days. You just have to respond and say, I received the request, and then you say when you can probably do it. And then there's procedures for cost, if there would be a major cost for that. We would suggest that it might be prudent if you get an open records request as a legislator that you reach out to the reviser of statutes, Gordon Self in this instance, because we have some information that we could share with you of being helpful to you that you could get out. Now testimony, so that's just you personally, but testimony generally, if we have testimony and a conferee comes up after that, we would give them a copy, or if we didn't have it available, then they could go to our committee assistant's office later and get a copy. But if it's a document that has been handed out to everyone here, the public is, it is an open record and the public should be able to ask for it and get a copy of that. Also, we can tell folks, because they're posted on the web, you know, we can immediately say, this has been posted under the committee assignment. There's all the testimonies there. You can get it there. So people are allowed to have it there. And so, and the same thing under COMA and CORA, there could be a civil penalty not to exceed $500 for each violation. They could have training to become more familiar with the act, but I mean, the same things apply there. So I'd be happy to answer questions on CORA, the open records, if there was anything that I didn't touch on.
Questions? You want to just add clarity to, if you're, when you're using email, don't aggregate everybody into the 2-line. Use the blind carbon copy and never hit reply all. Representative Steens?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And does that, when someone makes a request, do they have to be specific about that request? Like, does it need to say, we want, when you say open records, does that include like emails, texts, any of those kinds of things? Or do they have to be specific about that request? Thank you.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, public records specifically do not include records made, maintained, or kept by members of the legislature. So you do not, if you have those things, you don't have to, they're not considered an open record and you don't have to give them up. In regard to specificity, a lot of times a request is very broad, but what they're really looking for is like X, Y, and Z. And so generally what happens in this instance is we would respond back or have you as a legislator respond back and say, well, that's a lot of records. Is there something specific you're looking for? And then we could narrow it down, like maybe they only want testimony on House Bill, 100 or they don't want everything. They just were looking for that specific thing.
Committee, any other questions? Okay, Jill, thank you very much. And Francie reminded me that I forgot to do something, which is not unusual. I had on the agenda introduction of the new team members. There's a few new faces around this center table here, so I think I'm going to start with Jenna, and if we can just kind of go around and if you introduce name and how you help us or how we help you, and then we'll go from there. Jenna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Jenna Moyer, and I'm with the Reviser of Statutes Office.
Jill Walters with the Reviser of Statutes. And if I may, we're going to have another person on the revisers team joining us. She couldn't join us today, but if I may, at the next meeting that she's here, take the liberty of introducing her at that time.
Who I am.
You got to be on record, Francie.
It's on. Okay, Francie Hernandez. I'm committee assistant to Representative David Bueller. I've been on this committee for 5 years now. Long time.
I'm Amanda Prosser. I'm with Legislative Research. I'll be staffing this committee.
I'm Sharday Kane with Legislative Research.
My name's Max Adams. I'm with the Broadcasting Department.
Thank you so much, and I think that's all we have for today. So I'm going to go, any saved rounds or alibis? That's a military thing when you close a meeting, sorry. Okay, so with that, we will adjourn for today. We have meeting and call the chair tomorrow, but then we start rolling into the calendar after that. So
Definitely not here tomorrow.
definitely not here tomorrow.
Chair,
Representative Rivas.
so are we adjourned or are we at ease?
You're adjourned. Fall out. Okay, committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.